Good day, strategy gamers, and welcome back to episode 6 of our Let's Play series, Downfall: Conquest of the Third Reich by GMT Games. In this series, we're going to be beginning with the OKW faction and their phasing, and we'll see if we can make it through Western Allies, OKH. I don't know if I have time to go all the way through to a Soviet turn as well, but we'll see how far we can get. At the very beginning, we see the weather phase, or the weather marker is behind our initiative marker. So we're going to go ahead and move that up to be in the same spot, and then we will roll 2 dice to see how far we move the current weather marker. That was abysmal. Not that it would have changed much with a high roll, but we moved 2 spaces. Sounds good. So no changes, obviously, to weather. Next, we have to take a look at the action track and choose what order we want to perform. So we'll hop over to that. So as we can see, there's really not much currently on the track for the OKW player. So we're going to move everything down and fill in the top slot with a newly drawn chit. Good old shuffle of the coffee mug. And we end up with a Soviet attack 4 order for infantry and armor. So not too useful to the OKW faction. We do have this mechanized order, which of course is dual-sided, so that's available to us. Just as a reminder, though, in our planning box for OKW, we actually already have a mechanized order. So our choices for order here are mechanized or mechanized. Oh, what to do? I think we will go ahead and play mechanized, but we will play mechanized from our planning space in our order track that we have. So then we can free up the planning space in case we need it for, getting another chit out of the way if there's one that we really want on the track, etc. It's just a good utility to have. So we're going to go ahead and play that from our planning track, which then is 12, initiative. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll pause, look at where that puts us on the initiative track, and then we'll also execute the order. As you can see, we're currently in slot 35, and initiative cost is 12 for mechanized reinforcements. So this is going to take us all the way up to 47. So we will land right on top of the Soviet initiative track, and of course we have to flip to our event pending side as we have passed the OKW event space. Now the mechanized order is really straightforward. You just gain 1 armored step. When we look at the map, there's really only a couple of places in which we could utilize that order, unfortunately. Now, we have an option or two probably in North Africa, for example, with the 5th Panzer and the Africa Corps there, where we could probably use it to reinforce their armor value. However, we also have this unit here in Brussels, the 15th currently infantry, it looks like. But if we were to flip it on its other side, we can actually convert it to a armored unit, thus increasing its really combat value with modifiers. The reason I'm going to go ahead and do it in Brussels is if we were to try to do the reinforcement in North Africa, we would risk the intercept and kind of naval mechanics of trying to get those reinforcement supplies to North Africa, and we may actually end up losing then maybe Italian fleet assets, having them interdicted, something like that. So in this case, we're going to play it a little safe, take the armor unit in Europe, because we know eventually the Allies will make it to mainland Europe and we'll need all the help we can get. So that's in the bag now, and we're a little better prepared for the future. Now that we've completed that, we're going to go ahead and resolve the event. So we'll hop on over to the event cards. So of course, one of the first things we do in the event procedure is we take the current event and move it to the discard pile, and that's now the spent event. Once we've done that, the revealed card from the draw pile becomes our new current event. And at this time, we have to go through and remove any air units that no longer match on the face-up cards here. So really, it's just the Western Allies that can have one air unit on the board. They do currently have one air unit. OKH has one air unit in Rostov on the East Front. So we're just going to take that off and put that back in the box here. So now that we've removed those, we have to go through the current event, and the current event is Soviet reserves. This effectively is just bolstering the Soviet forces by giving them 4 infantry reinforcements, and we can't use more than 1 step on shock units. So pretty simplistic card to follow. I'm going to reposition the camera to the Eastern Front, and we will add these 4 infantry reinforcement steps. So now that we're looking at the Eastern Front, we can decide where we want to put these 4 infantry reinforcements. I did cut off the most southeastern part of the front, as every unit there is already at max strength, so there's no real consideration to be had. I think the first step we will use in reinforcing this shock unit that's over here in Stalingrad. Shock units are just a little more valuable, I think, for 2 reasons. One, you have different orders that give you flexibility in being able to attack with shock units, and it's good to kind of have that healthy balance of your strength on the front to initiate the attacks with. And second, they do have some DRMs that can just be helpful during combat, or strength modifier, sorry, maybe not a DRM, but a strength modifier. The second is, priority-wise, I think we're going to look for any mechanized units and make sure we get those to full strength, as if we do get an armor reinforcement, we're able to then flip that over at a higher strength value once we get the armor reinforcement. So here we have a mechanized unit. We're going to rotate this to be full strength, 3 pips. So that's used up 2 of the 4 reinforcements that we have. So I think the next consideration now really is just what part of the front do we anticipate pushing most strongly against in the near term here. We've talked about in the north, it's a little bit bottled, and it's going to take a couple of phases to actually break through there because of the terrain and the hex spines. So I think that perhaps the areas of interest would be here, really, when we're looking at driving towards Minsk, because this is just a little bit more of a direct path to make it to Germany proper if we can expand this salient and go forward. But then, of course, there's also the possibility to drive just south of Kursk and try to really isolate and surround these other units that are in the southeast of the front. Those are real 2 possibilities for us as the Soviet player, and they're both going to be a little costly. I think at the moment what we're going to look to do is to reinforce around Kursk, simply because the value of isolating these units and getting them all removed from the game is pretty significant. And second, we don't really have the quantity of forces around Minsk right now to actually break through. We could attempt to do so, but we don't have many supporting flanking units to take advantage of our really just larger forces. But around Kursk we do. We have them pretty well in contact along the front line. So I think we will then take this unit here, move that to full strength, and then another unit that we'll look at here would be, in this stack, we'll take one of these 2. Yeah, we'll just take the top one and move that to a full strength. So that exhausts the 4 infantry reinforcements, and only 1 was used to a shock unit, so we have met the requirements of the card, and we're going to hop back over to the event cards to finalize that procedure. Time now to look at the pending card and see what that's going to be. So we'll flip over the top card in the draw pile. And the card, I'm going to bring it just a little closer to the camera so everybody can read it a little more easily. Card is Commando Supro. It has a whole bunch of conditions which at this moment we don't meet. The largest being that if we have 2 of the strategic warfare tracks inactive, meaning the West have kind of locked it down, then we would execute a number of different actions here, but we don't have that. So otherwise, on the bottom it reads Axis reinforcements, 1 OKW infantry as a reinforcement. So we'll next have to look at where we want to try to bring in a infantry reinforcement unit for OKW. In the interim, we do also draw for the Western Allies an action card. That's a pretty decent one. Combat command. So for American or French units, in fall it's a +2 modifier, in summer it's a +1, and in mud there's no effect. So just a little bit of additional help when resolving combats for the Western Allies with that action card. We'll go ahead now and for the pending event resolve that though by doing a reinforcement on a OKW infantry. So let's hop over to that. So this is another interesting decision for OKW where, we could apply this applicable reinforcement step to our forces in North Africa, but then we risk the interdiction and sea attack option that the Western Allies would have against our Italian fleets in the Mediterranean. And I really would prefer to keep those Mediterranean fleets at full strength for the eventual movement and retreat of the forces from North Africa. So that's why, again, I'm going to elect to not actually go ahead and use reinforcements into North Africa. Perhaps a faulty tactic, I don't know, but I really want to get those guys out of North Africa as the priority. And I do know that on Europe, we will eventually need these reinforcements. So in Saint-Nazaire, we're going to take this infantry unit here and rotate it to its 3 pip strength. And that is how we will satisfy the OKW reinforcement. Just to wrap up on the event cards here, we do now show that there are 2 Western Ally air units. So the second one we're going to place, I'm going to do it just off camera here, in North Africa on the 1st British unit that we have in North Africa, just east of Algiers. And with that, I'll also flip over the initiative marker from its event pending side, and we'll hop up to the initiative track to see who's going to go next. So we see on the initiative track that the next faction up to play is the Western Allies. So of course, first thing we're going to do is move the current weather marker up to the Western Ally location, and then we'll roll 2 die to see how much further we advance it. A 6, so that's going to bring us up to 46, still in weather period 2 though, so we got a bit to go. Now the Western Allies, all the factions are starting to get a little bunched up here in terms of initiative costs, so again we have to be mindful when we choose our action order that there may be consequences, right, if we go too far in advance of some of the other factions, and if we build up too much of a lead, they might start to get an opportunity for double turns. So we're going to hop over to the action track now and choose which order we want to proceed with. So looking at the action track, we see there's no empty spots to fill in, and the Western Allies kind of have a plethora of choices. I'm going to put on camera as well what's currently in their planning box, and that's a 3 attack with infantry and armor. We see on the bottom we also have an attack then redeploy order. Unfortunately, if we look across the entire map, for those 2 options, there's nobody that we're next to. So it feels a little wasteful in a sense, because we don't have the option to attack anybody, which is a core component of those two orders. Now, the attack redeploy would have some value, although it still feels a little wasteful that we could not end up attacking anybody, but then still move. So kind of treating it as a purely redeploy order, but at a higher cost. Above that, we have a recruit option. So one thing to note is that, in North Africa, we don't have many forces, and those we do, thinking specifically about the 8th British and some of the Australian or Anzac forces around Suez, they don't have a lot of strength to them. So, I mean, you could always use it to try to buff those up a little bit. Unfortunately, the 1st British, that's just east of Algiers and nearest to 5th Panzer, it's armor. So the recruit option there doesn't do as much because it just gives us infantry steps for the 1st British. We have the headquarters unit, which would allow us to do an operations order. Still available to us would be a 5-movement redeploy, and then a redeploy attack and attack redeploy option. So there's a couple of benefits there. If we were to choose that, where then we could maybe move our forces up to begin engaging the enemy. And then, of course, we have the redeploy and attack order at the top of the track. That, however, has 3 orders in front of it, so adding 3 to its initiative cost then brings that up to be a 12. So that's pretty costly to do a redeploy and then attack. The other thing, too, is just I don't know that we have sufficient strength right now to necessarily, have advantageous combat positions in North Africa. 1st British, as I mentioned, it would really have a tough time trying to achieve anything. And when we look at the 8th British, well, it's got decent strength with 3 pips. It's all by itself, so it doesn't have any flanking support or anything like that, which is a challenge in North Africa, just given kind of the terrain. So I am a little inclined to consider the recruit option for reinforcements, as that could help us reinforce the 8th British mechanized that's currently in North Africa. And I think we might have the opportunity to reinforce some other units here. Give me just a second as I look at that. Yeah, so what I wanted to just confirm was, in the force pool, did we have units that we could perhaps use the recruit order for to bring into play? And of course we do have a couple of options. The 2 that look most interesting to me would be the following. We could bring in the 1st Canadian, and what's appealing there is it's an elite unit, so that gives us a great modifier in combat. And then, of course, we have the 5th U.S. Infantry, which is a pretty decent unit and also has the option to flip over to a strong armored side as well, which will eventually get those armor points then to be able to reinforce it to such. And we can bring those right into the United States hex or the Canada hex on the North Atlantic chart. And then in a following turn, we could use a redeploy to try to bring them into North Africa. And then that would help alleviate some of the concern we have with the 1st British and the 8th British forces being all by themselves. So I think the recruit option is going to be the way to go. We will have to spend the extra initiative cost to use that, since we have an order below it that's available to us. But we're happy to do so. I think that brings it to a 16 cost then for initiative. So that is pretty expensive. But to be able to have some of these units available to us in North Africa is really going to help us, well, one of 2 things. Force the OKW forces out, or accelerate the timetable in which OKW feels they have to evacuate. So we'll take the recruit order and play that. I will adjust the initiative track, but I guess first we should consider which we're spending it on. probably a couple of different strategies that could come into play here. You could bring both of these units in. So, for example, we could bring in the 5th US at a strength 2, the 1st Canadian at a strength 2, and then that gives us a little bit more variability with flanking options when we're looking to attack in North Africa. Or we could go all in, for example, with the 5th US and bring it in at a 4 strength unit and try to get it to North Africa ready and rearing for combat. No wait time really needed. I think I'm going to go with bringing the, excuse me, I need to actually orient these for you guys there. I think I'm going to bring the 5th US in at a 4 strength though. And one of the reasons for that is as we do the redeploy ops, we do have to go through the North Atlantic Ocean sea zone, which does still have OKW submarines. So there's a possibility that we could then have a sea attack and lose steps in our redeploy units. So we will go ahead and put the 5th US on board in the United States. And I will go ahead and move the initiative marker, and we can see where everything sits there. We're also probably going to have a pending event. So looking at the initiative track, it's actually a cost of 16, just to remind ourselves. So that's going to put us right on the Soviet event space here. And of course, we'll flip over for event pending as we've crossed the Western Ally event hex. I did this a little out of order. We've already resolved the order by putting the 5th US in the United States. So next what we'll do is go ahead to resolve that event, and we'll take a look at the event cards. All right, so of course, first thing we do is the current event moves to the discard pile. Then the revealed card moves to our current event. Our air units now, we have to remove one Western air unit from the forces in North Africa. I think we're going to take the one out of Libya with the 8th British and leave the one near Algiers on the 1st British still active. And I'm sure that everybody 5 or 10 minutes ago in the video was going, wait, you don't resolve the Axis reinforcements for Commando Supremo yet. Yeah, I got ahead of myself, I think, there and resolved the event before I should have. So effectively, we've already done this step by resolving that OKW infantry. So bit of a mistake and out of order on my part, but I don't think there was any harm or foul in the order of operations in which we had that, but a good reminder to really pay attention to the sequence of play here. So now that we've resolved that current event 10 minutes ago, we're now going to reveal the top card in the draw pile and see what that is. So this is a very fun card, especially earlier on in the game, Mare Nostrum. And if there are no Axis units in Africa, first apply the Africa Liberated event, but there are Axis forces, so there's no need to do any of that. Otherwise, the Axis reinforcements get one OKW armored. And we will, of course, wait more appropriately this time to resolve that when we next have an event sequence, and that becomes our current event. We will put the marker on, though, to remind ourselves that this was revealed during an OKH turn for the Western Allies here. So when that air unit becomes available, it'll be an OKH air unit. And now we go through and take a look at the action cards we get. So we're going to get an OKW and an Western Ally action cards. We'll look at the Western Ally action card first. And just artillery, a +1 modifier for combat with any Western unit. Pretty generic, but very useful. We will accumulate those in use them in abundance once we start to see some combat. And then we have a card that will go into the OKW's hand here, and this is light tanks. So just a combat modifier for Axis unit in fall and summer, assuming that they have some armor, and that's what it's simulating. Looking at air units, we actually are able to add a OKH air unit now to the Eastern Front. We'll switch over the camera angle real quick to do that, and then we'll close out this phase, and we'll probably close out the video after that too. So looking at the front here, sitting across the table from my opponent, I'm picking up on signals that they may be looking to cut south along the Kursk-Kharkiv line. So given that, I think if we place this air unit in Kharkiv, that then gives us the kind of best coverage for combat support with that range of 4 across a number of our defending units. And I can't really think of a better spot that we could put that than there. So that's what we'll do. I'm going to flip the event pending marker, of course, over to its resolved side. And this has been another really fun episode of recording Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich. Glad to be back into some of the videos here, be more coming. Got distracted, of course, with other games on other tables, but have left this up, and we will continue playing through it. As always, should you have any questions or comments, or sometimes a bit of a trend with these videos, if I counted anything correctly or did anything out of order that I didn't already catch. Obviously, we had to mix up the event cards. Please leave it in the comments section below so both myself can have the reminder, but also others following the channel to learn the game can have a good reference for any rules mistakes. And I, of course, will try to correct those in future videos if you do notice any. Thanks, as always, for watching and your continued support. And as always, strategy gamers, hoping you have yourselves an excellent day. Bye now.